Hi, this is Orlando City Commissioner Robert Stuart. Very soon I'll be retiring from my position after 20 years of service to the citizens of Orlando, but before I retire, I wanted to leave a gift of history. I've had the wonderful opportunity to interact with so many people that have had such an impact on our city and how it's grown and how it's developed. Please join me on this audio journey as we meet these very interesting and influential people. Hello, it's Robert. I just want to take a moment and apologize for the sound quality of today's presentation. I had an opportunity to go and visit with Mayor Frederick at his home, and everything worked great except my microphone. So my apologies. Enjoy. Thank you. Thank you for joining us today with Orlando History Makers. I'm your host, Orlando City Council member Robert Stuart, asking for just a few minutes of your time as we learn what makes our city and our community so exciting and vibrant. It's my intent to bring some of the great stories of Orlando's history to life, to look at the impact of these events and the people, and to create an interest in our very own exciting history. Today we're joined by one of my favorite people in the whole world, former mayor of Orlando, Bill Frederick, and his wonderful wife, Joanne. There's so much I can say in introducing you, but our listeners, Mr. Mayor Bill, let's just start with the basics. Mayor Frederick is the son of a Winter Haven haberdasher and moved to Orlando many years ago. Became mayor in 1980 and oversaw a surge of growth and prosperity that may never be duplicated. He served as mayor for 12 years and engineered Orlando into a framework for becoming a world-class city, the world-class city that it is today. So thank you, Mayor, for joining me.
Well, you're most welcome.
Now, before we begin, will you just share a few minutes about your early life and coming to Orlando?
Well, I grew up in Winter Haven, and I had always wanted to be a lawyer from way back. And not only a lawyer, but a trial lawyer. And back in those days, those opportunities were very limited. For example, in Orlando, we had fewer than 1,000 lawyers. Fewer than 100 lawyers altogether, a very small number.
That's about what time?
This was when I was considering coming here, when I was in law school in the late 60s and early 70s. And in any event, when it appeared that I was going to get out of law school alive, I started looking around, and I didn't know, frankly, any lawyers around the state. That may seem surprising, but it was the case. So the one person I did know was the older brother of Jerry Pierce. Jerry was a neighbor of mine in Winter Haven, and his older brother, Frank, had moved to Orlando and had a very successful law practice. So I called Frank and said, I'm looking for a job, and what do you think? And he said, well, let me talk to Leon. And I said, Leon? Well, Leon was Leon Handley, who'd grown up in Lakeland and was a member of Gurney, McDonald, and Handley. So in due course, I got an interview and was actually offered and took a job there.
I read through your book, and we're going to talk later on about your book called A Mayor's Tale.
Yes.
And I read about your book, and that you got paid so much money, like $450 a month.
Yes. That wasn't a living wage back then, but it was about all that anybody could get. So here I was on a starvation wage, and I took it from there.
Well, that's great. Orlando is not the same without you. So
well, you're very kind.
I admire you, and now kind of take us from you're kind of this trial lawyer to now all of a sudden you can.
Well, in between that, I was appointed public defender, and that's an interesting story. It won't take too much time, but I was a year and a half out of law school when the public defender system came into practice. Up until that time, if you were an accused felon that didn't have any money, and you weren't charged with a capital crime, one that could result in death penalty, you stood alone by yourself in front of the judge and jury. So when the public defender system came along, John Moyle, who was a very close friend of mine, was up with governor, and I said, you need to come down here, and you and I need to start a practice together. So the idea was John would take the public defender office and we would start a practice. Well, John's wife, Jean, didn't think Orlando was a little bit too rural for her taste, and she wanted to go back to West Palm Beach. So he said, well, blah, 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 I can't come, but why don't you take it? I said, me? And truthfully, I not only had never tried a criminal case, I had never seen one, never been in, never seen it. So anyhow, the long and the short is that the offer was made for me to take it. I took it, and I enjoyed every bit of it. It was a great learning experience and a fun time.
Now, at that time, the public defender was actually a part-time job, wasn't it?
It was. We had 18 circuits in the state. There are now more. My circuit had 8 counties. I went all the way down to St. Lucie and Martin and Okeechobee, 400 miles round trip to a hearing down in Okeechobee County. And it was a great opportunity.
I didn't have much staff either, if I remember.
No, actually, when this was funded, the total funding for the entire Ninth Circuit, which was our 8-county circuit, was $15,500. That was $9,000 something for a public defender and $6,000 for an assistant. Everything else was left unfunded and left for the local defender to locate from the volunteer services of the various counties that were to be serviced.
How was that possible?
Well, it was damn near impossible, pardon the term, but we clearly, this system was here to stay. And when I went first to Orange County, I took quite a bit of time talking to the judges and to Mike Steed, who was the county solicitor, and ended up getting an idea about how much we would need in terms of funding and so forth. And I went to Orange County, and I had divided a budget up that all these judges had approved. And Orange County looked at it very, very sympathetically and gave me exactly what I wanted. And my next trip was to Seminole County, and wow, that was a different story altogether. I no sooner had made my request than one of the commissioners said, "Move to deny," and in about a 2-minute appearance before that commission body, I'd lost my funding. So I had the wits about me, for surprising even today to think about that, but I said, could I have a minute? Let me point something out. Everybody that's charged with a criminal case is going to have to sit in your jail until they're convicted or acquitted. That can, because your trial term is sometimes only once a year, that means you're going to have to feed and look after these people in large numbers for a long time at great expense. And I said, if you would simply give me what I'm asking, I think I can reduce that total cost of yours, which you can't avoid, by the way. I can reduce that substantially. And the long and the short of it is the county reversed its position. I got funded, and off we went.
That's great. Now, there's a time frame between kind of that and being mayor. So
yeah, that was in 63, and of course I started running for mayor in the mid-70s.
But you got involved in politics a little bit. Tell me a little bit about the key people. The interesting part in reading your book, A Mayor's Tale, by the way, is that all the names that you mentioned are guys who I grew up with. I mean, I was the young little kid. So, Butch Wooten and Jerry Billings, these are guys who I used to sell to them at a previous job, and I got to know them. It was so much fun reading your book.
Well, it was a fun time and an important time. Obviously, it was frontier justice before we got a right to lawyers for people accused of major crimes, and that's the way it should have been resolved, and in fact was resolved.
So now you got politics. Now you get involved in politics.
Yep, I had gotten the public defender office well established, and we were moving along very well, I thought. And I had been president of the State Public Defender Association, and Leroy Collins decided to run for the U.S. Senate and asked me if I would chair his campaign in Central Florida. So that gave me a chance to exit the public defender office and pick that up because my personal injury trial work, the part that was not full-time, was going very well, and I was doing better than I had hoped, and I went from there.
Now, a little sidebar.
Yeah.
You and I have had this conversation before. I also was a supporter of Governor Collins.
Yes, right.
And the short story goes, as I remember, you may remember a little bit differently, was where we were putting out signs and we gathered on the edge of the old Chamber of Commerce building on the edge of Lake Ivanhoe. We all gathered there. Somehow I got picked with you, and I think you had a convertible, and we just piled stuff in the back. And we were saying, put the signs out. And so we go down every street, going down Livingston, and we were nailing signs to trees hanging all over the road.
And telephone poles.
And they say, the guy pulls us over and says, I'm a police officer. And he says, I'm sorry, you can't do that, sir. I'm thinking to myself, I'm going to jail. At the time, I was probably 14 or 15 years old. I'm not going to jail. And I admire this young attorney so much. I had never forgotten. It was really kind of my first foray into doing anything in the terms of politics. Later on, with George and some other stuff we did.
Let me add one little curious thing is that, of course, we didn't have the talent or the funds to actually put signs everywhere. But what I did is I figured out the path I was going to take from the airport to where he was going to speak. And we decorated all those streets and made it look like we had really done something.
And it was so much fun. Okay, so the people who are listening, you purchased a home just really a few houses from where I grew up.
Yep.
And I was older at the time, and I was in high school. And it was great having you as a neighbor. I fell in love with you and fell in love with Joanne. Well, I want to talk to you a little bit more about kind of towards the direction of becoming mayor. So tell me, how did you come to mayor? So we had Bob Carr, who passed away in office, and Carl Langford, who had lost to Bob and then ran again. So when Bob, the mayor, Carr passed away, and then Carl had served up to 1980, and so kind of bring everybody a little bit up to date.
Yeah, I had never given any serious thought to local office. Frankly, I thought people that did that were a little bit beneath the interest area that I had in politics. A little vain, I might add, but that was the case. And I had gotten a job as chairman of the Department of Pollution Control. I had been appointed to that position by first a couple of governors, and then Bob Graham continued my office there, and I enjoyed that a lot.
Which became
that was Florida's equivalent of that, yeah. And we regulated the price of utilities and a number of things that were very important to the state. So, I had a background in that. I was a little bit known because it was a little cabinet office, and I did things with editorial boards around the state. And, I thought maybe one day I might take on a elected office, but local office was not on the chart. That all sort of changed when we ran into Disney was coming here. We had an airport that was in conversion, taking over the Orlando Air Force Base and converting it into the international airport that it is today. And we worked hard to keep that going. In the meantime, Champ Williams, who had run the Skyline restaurant at the Orlando, the small airport.
He had all the concessions.
Yep. Well, anyhow, he had managed to get his hands on everything, and everybody at the city at the time were giving Champ anything he wanted. And They even came to me 4 years before I ran and wanted me to run. And Shelton Adams came and was the emissary of Champ Williams and said, "We think you ought to, we ought to run." And I could see at that time that I was going to be the spokesperson for Champ, and that didn't sit well with me. So I said no. And much to my surprise, Shelton decided to run himself. He couldn't find anybody else, and he almost beat Carl Langford in a race that was very close. And then 2 years later, after that defeat, he was elected to the city council, and it was against Shelton Adams that I was propped up to be the candidate for mayor. Peter Barr came to me, and Jerry Scheikone and a number of good friends. Your brother Jacob actually had been Carl Langford's campaign manager, and that allowed him to exit and be part of my campaign as well. So we went from there, and it was an uphill battle. I mean, clearly I was against the city commissioner that was on the news every night, and we ran a very hard race, ran it for a year and a half, and ended up being very successful. I think out of the 30 districts, I think I took 28, and was sort of a landslide in those terms. And that's how I got in office. The
interesting part is, in reading through your book, because what happened in 1980 now is considered commonplace in order to run a campaign. And what you did with just manpower was to identify who the super voters were in the city, and you just went after the super voters and their households.
Yeah, and to get those names, you had to go down at that time. The computerized list didn't exist. So we went down literally and by hand went through every voter record. And if somebody didn't vote in a city election, we discounted them. We reduced the people that we would have to contact by that process.
Literally in seconds.
It is, literally.
And I've run now 5 campaigns, and every one of those campaigns is focused on that same area. But I've had the data to be able to do that.
Mm-hmm.
I can't imagine the volunteers going down and going through every one of these cards of people and saying, okay.
It was a chore. But the importance of it was, if you didn't do it, you didn't have the data. And so Shelton didn't bother to do that, and I had a benefit of knowing where we could concentrate our forces and had to have an advantage that way.
And it was successful. You won pretty big.
Yeah, pretty big.
And today, I mean, I literally could write, if you wrote a book in 1980 about that,
yeah,
I think people around the country would go, this is the smartest idea in the whole world. And data just eventually caught up with your idea.
Yep.
Which now makes it happen so fast. So, okay, quick story. Tell me a little bit about your first meeting and one of our very good friends, Grace Tuning, and her willingness to kind of help guide you through the first meeting.
Well, as I mentioned earlier, I not only had never been in this city hall, I had never had any experience with any city committees or whatever. So I was a total novice in this regard. Now, I got some help from Grace and a number of people that, like you and others, that knew what the hell was going on. But I came down there after I'd been elected, but before I was sworn in, I said, I'd like to look at the files. And said, files? We don't have any files. And the way Carl Langford, and I'm very fond of the role that he played. He was just right for the times and so forth, a good mayor. But he organized it differently. And I said, I'd like to see his files. Well, we don't have any. Okay. And his office was in this cavernous building. Too big in the door. He took the door off. Carl Langford, a very clever politician, had an open door policy, which was literally he took the door off his office, and if you walked by and the mayor was sitting behind his desk, you were sort of encouraged to come in and say hello. Well, that was nice, but I couldn't get anything done with that. So I moved my office to where it currently stayed for the rest of the time that building was in place. And that room was occupied by Carl Langford's gun collection all over the floor: machine guns, rifles, pistols, mortars, everything you can imagine. And he had only one key, which, of course, he did surrender to me at the time. And in due course, we cleaned all that up, and that's where I ended up practicing as mayor. And it was, but it was a challenging time because we reinvented local government. I mean, we went from the way he had done it to the way that I had gotten some advice from. I'm trying to think of who it was with anyhow, one of my good friends in the state came down and helped out, and we reorganized the whole plan and put it together, and the city adopted it, and we went from there.
Well, you were right that Carl was the right mayor at the right time.
Yeah.
And I'm going to tell you, you were the right mayor at the right time.
Well, thank you.
I do want to share a story that Jacob told me because of the benefit of me doing this. It's kind of, all of y'all. So Jacob said, "Where's all the data?" He goes, "Carl took a letter, a few of them, a letter, and he would turn it over and he would write his response in the back and he would mail it back to you." And I said, "Did he ever keep a copy?" "Well, no, I keep a copy." So you send a letter to him. Today, it's all email and everything's tracked. But he was what you would normally do is just write a response. You'd have a carbon copy of some sort. You attach it, you keep it. You didn't do the actual letter. He wrote the response back, and I kind of sit back and didn't have to touch it. And I thought to myself, well, that's kind of ingenious.
Well, let me tell you, Orlando was beginning to feel the impact of Disney, and we'd gone through this announcement to an explosion of growth, and our wastewater system just couldn't adopt to the growth demands of the time. And it went from there, and we had to reorganize virtually everything that we did. Mayor Langford was a night owl, and he, according to Randall James, who was his aide, apparently would be tippling a little bit, and he would show up late in the afternoon, and that's the way it went. And so we had to work around all of that. And the crime rate in Orlando, we had grown as a result of the influx of Disney personnel and so forth. We had the highest crime rate of any city in Florida, and one of the highest in the nation. Now, part of that may have been that we weren't counting our visitors correctly, but in any event, the crime rate was twice what it was in almost any other major city. So the first thing we did is what we should have done and what cities should do, and that is public safety is the number one issue of, I think, any city government, and then recreation and other things that come along are part of it. But we took that on, and it was a challenge. I mean, the city was a mess. It was, as a family member, you wouldn't want to take your family through Lake Eola at the time. The streets were a mess, and in all of this, the Langford administration had reduced the police department by 15 or 20%. Well, it should have gone the other way around, and we did that, and we got the crime rate didn't eliminate it, because you never do that, but we brought it where it wasn't the number one concern in people's minds.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
All right, so let's go back to the city hall.
Yep.
Because you're the closest thing I know to a bona fide movie star.
Well, you're talking about when we destroyed, when we
built a new city hall. And we built it behind the existing city hall.
But we needed the existing, it overlapped with the existing city hall, so that had to come down. And somebody on my staff had the bright idea, it may have been Tom Kohler, I can't remember, said, I think we could sell this implosion to the movies and get a little money and get some out of it. And sure enough, uh, Danny Glover, I think, and who the other movie star was.
Lethal Weapon.
Yeah, they came here and blew up the city hall, and and I remember
You got a speaking part now,
I did have a speaking part.
but you weren't mayor. What were you? Do you remember?
I was well at that time. I was the mayor,
I don't know. In the movie,
but in the movie, I was head of the police of the task force, and I think I had a 2-sentence line about what's going on here, something like
so
that.
just enough so you could have to
Just-
the
But curiously enough, my name was never mentioned in the credits of the movie. No,
oh, that's great.
one of my real disappointments in life.
Now you remember the way it was all set up, but there was a little cafe area that was right down on
Yep.
South Street.
Hmm.
I watched the entire thing from there.
Oh, really?
So everybody who could be anybody could get down there. So we got down there and watched it. It was wonderful. I mean, but you're a movie star. All right, so let's talk a little bit about your tenure because you brought up a little bit of it. So we have a new city hall. They have the growth of downtown Orlando, the transformation of Lake Eola, all the things that are involved with the expansion of the Orlando International Airport, which is incredible. The new Orlando Arena,
Right,
near term, the creation of the Orlando Magic,
right.
and
The
that's
planning for the new Performing Arts Center.
right. So those just a few.
Yeah.
When you reflect back now 30 years later, yes, 30 maybe.
Yep.
What do you remember most fondly about those things? What comes to mind?
I think the thing that was the most interesting in reflection was the struggle to obtain the downtown arena. The funding was entirely controlled by the county, and the county hated me. And
How was that possible?
I'll tell you how it was possible. Your brother made it possible. George, who had been on the city council and had then been elected to the Senate, made it known that if this wasn't going to be a downtown and if the proper funding wasn't appropriately allowed, there wouldn't be a new arena. And sure enough, we went through one session of the legislature and didn't get it done.
I remember.
And it was a touch and go thing. But when the county finally realized that they were up against a wall, they came to their senses and we worked it out, but not without, frankly, daily struggles with the county.
Well, back in those days, when you wanted a professional sports team,
Yeah,
you had to build the arena and say, "Okay, I've got it. Now come." Okay.
yeah,
And NBA's doing an expansion. Jacob was in the middle of all that stuff.
Right.
I want to share. I can share some of his stories. But when you go back and look at the Orlando Arena, we didn't have a basketball team when we built it.
no, we didn't have anything when we built
We
it.
built it a little bit for hockey.
Well, let me point this out. In the entire state of Florida, there was not an enclosed building that would seat 1,000 people. Big enclosed arenas and facilities simply didn't exist. Now, Miami and Jacksonville were in the process of getting that done, and that helped us out because we weren't the first. But Miami clearly had their mind to have a facility that would accommodate an expansion team for an NBA basketball group. And we were in competition with Miami for that. There are a lot of ancillary stories we don't have time to get into, but that was an interesting challenge too, as to how we competed with that. And you will recall, but people listening will not recall that the NBA decided to go for 2 teams, and we ended up, and Miami got one. I think if they had just done one at the time, probably we would have lost. Yeah. Now we gotten one eventually, but not at the time we did. So
It's interesting how all the pieces and parts came together. So we're building the arena. Pat Williams kind of adopts us and thinks it's a great idea.
Mhm.
And so he's got all the connections internally. The Hewitts are now in the middle of all this stuff. And then there was this move that we had to have so many season tickets sold, and so
Right.
we sold. So and
Oversold it.
Jacob's in charge of getting all those.
Yep.
And there were like 16,000 season ticket
Yep.
subscriptions. I'm not sure how many actually bought their first season ticket, but you could pay for like I think $200 or $300. You get a down payment into it.
Well, that was not. I get no credit for that part of it, but that was brilliant, and it was well done by the people that took it on.
Together. And
Yeah.
we're here. I mean, the magic are here literally today because of what you did, and then we've now gone to a new arena and all the rest of that stuff. Tell me what else when you begin to look. I mean, the airport becomes this really important thing that's happening. UCF begins to bring new students, people from all over the state at least, to be exposed to Orlando, even though they're slightly out of Orlando. What else kind of comes to mind of things?
Well, one of the stories that's almost totally unknown is the fact that the EPA had only came into existence after the late 70s. And the situation was that if you didn't have enough wastewater capacity, you couldn't get a building permit. So you had to have that beforehand. Other things that would have been attendant to that requirement could have been shuffled around and waited, but not wastewater. And what we did, what are you going to do? We needed something like 20,000 gallons a day capacity. And so we hired two engineering firms, and we went into Jerry Schicone came up as a big help. I said, why don't we take some of this water that we use to irrigate groves and use that to spray, irrigate, and get rid of this treated effluent? Well, that sounds pretty easy, but people who buy oranges don't necessarily want their oranges grown with wastewater. But we got that taken care of, and then we built ribs, which are rapid infiltration basins, which by gravity, when the groves didn't need the water, we could alternate with that.
Then also did Orange County National, the golf course.
Yeah,
and
yeah, that, and then on the other side of town, where the water levels were different, we couldn't use. There weren't groves, so Phil Searcy we bought 1,600 acres from a local businessman here, and built a rapid discharge basin where through trickle flow, these nutrients were absorbed in the water, and what was discharged out of that 1,600 acres was better water than was in the receiving waters. And it received the Grand Conceptor Award internationally.
That's the Orlando Wetlands.
Yep. And this, was not widely known, but those two things made a huge difference. We would have been in a moratorium. We could not have done what we did if we hadn't had that capacity.
Okay, so a lot of things happen. I know a lot of things make you proud, and obviously I'm proud just to call you a friend. Are there any other little behind the curtain glimpses of things that somebody would be interested in about your term as mayor? I mean, I think of the time when you were at Ronnie's and somebody.
Yeah, I was at Ronnie's. That was a very popular watering hole. It's now gone, but at that time, this is where the elite met to eat and drink and have coffee. And I was there one morning with a breakfast group, and I was checking out. Somebody came to the door and said, "There's somebody's being killed out here." And and so I was literally maybe 50 yards from where this was happening. And I went out there, and sure enough, a guy was in a car stabbing a woman with a screwdriver. Would have killed her, I think. So I grabbed his feet, and I think I had the help of one of the person. We dragged him out. Well, he had a weapon, and I didn't. So my car was parked nearby. I went over and got the pistol that the city had offered. And I chased this guy down, and I went back to City Hall, and I ended up getting the newspaper had called me and said, "What what's going on? I said, well, the strangest thing happened down here at Ronnie's and blah, blah, blah. And I said, you wouldn't believe what. Well, the next thing I know that the whole city hall is covered with the reporters and so forth. And I was, well, you shot your gun in the air. You might have shot an airplane down there. And that's silly stuff like that. But it turned out it started off to look like I was going to be made a fool for having done what I did, but it ended up being a celebrated event that was, I got letters from all over the world on that.
I think it's great. Now, there have been some colorful leaders in our community. You've had to deal with some of them. And of course, I know these same names. Well, you look over their past and who you partnered with. What are some of the names of these people that kind of come to mind? You mentioned some of the early partners, of course, Jerry Chicone and his love for the city of Orlando.
Well, you and your brother and a lot of community leaders all came and accepted responsibility for things that needed to be done, and we moved it along pretty good. I thought for the time. We one of the things that you would have a special interest in is that we had no capacity for the indigent population that existed, and that was about 1,000, 1,500 people out of our entire population base, and a good third of those were really honest, hardworking people just down on their luck that didn't have a job and didn't have any money. And they were an easy group to take care of because when we provided a place for them, but we didn't have a place, as you know better than most, that we could do. And we built that up, and today I think it works pretty well. And
of course, that need is always changing. But
yep.
Fred Ward was important.
Yep.
But as it turns out, Fred Ward was also important in the founding of the Christian Service Center 20 years earlier that I eventually ended up running. Then Fred Ward steps in the same place. And then we have these just wonderful connections with downtown. And I think it's what you created, I think, more than anything else, and I've tried to emulate that, was that these agencies downtown are really in partnership with one another, less than they are in competition with one another.
Exactly.
And when I became the Christian Service Center, I became the executive director back in '95. One of the things that we did was I met with the 4 agency heads every month. We had coffee or breakfast every month just to get to know each other.
And the city had never helped. They had never offered any financial help until that time. And I remember we bought the old bus station and remodeled that and did some things with it, and then built up a capacity that we handled out of the 1,500, 500 that were the indigents. We were able to take 500 or 600. It took a big bite out of the need.
All right, so legacy, as you know, is an important word. And you've had the privilege of kind of being, in my mind, kind of a living legacy, at least to those who get to know you. As you reflect on this idea, what are some guiding words, guiding thoughts that you would have kind of for the next generation of leaders?
It will vary with what the needs of the community are. I think public safety is always an issue there. What right now, which I think we'd all like to see some help downtown. I think downtown is a little less than the tidy place that we'd like. The new Performing Arts Center was a big step in getting that resolved, but still in all, I don't go downtown at night, and I doubt if you do. I'd like to see that straightened out, and
that's a real challenge, and it's crazy that it is, and it is accelerated post-COVID, which is just kind of weird. So the city is struggling to get their arms around it, and I think we're going to get there. It's going to take some more energy, but you're exactly right. All right, so let me kind of conclude with this. If you want to know more about Bill Frederick and his time as Orlando's mayor, you can read more about it at orlandomemory.info through the Orlando or the Orange County library systems. But there's plenty of articles about Mayor Frederick. And let me personally recommend, I shared with you his own book, his memoir called Mayor's Tale. I love it because the subtitle is Navigating the Rough Seas of Urban Government. I can't think of anybody who's been better articulate that. I'm so appreciative of what you've done. But it's really a great read, not only about history, but about the policy and the response and how you respond. I've read the memoirs of Mayor Langford and several others, and sometimes they're just telling the facts. This is in your book. I love it because you talk about how behind the facts and how you actually got there. So, Mayor Bill, thank you. I'm so honored to have spent time with you and speaking on behalf of our entire community. I express my gratitude to you and your leadership.
Might I add that no person by himself gets these things done. I was blessed to have, I thought, basically an unqualifiedly good city council. And remember, that council went from 3 to 5 the very day that I came in. It was authorized earlier, but it was. We have had some great people like you, and I happen to think that Buddy has done a great job. As I think he may have stayed too long. From the experience that I had, I think. But I'm a big fan of his, so I don't mean to take anything away from what he's done.
Well, I want to thank you. If you want to know more about Mayor Bill Frederick and his time as Orlando's mayor, you can read more about it at orlandomemory.info or through the Orange County Library System's website. And there's plenty of articles about Mayor Frederick, but I personally recommend Mayor Frederick's own memoir, A Mayor's Tale. The subtitle gives you a glimpse into the book, Navigating the Rough Seas of Urban Government. It's a great read about policy, response, and interaction of local government. And it's got a little history in there too. Mayor Bill, thank you. I am so honored to have spent this time with you and speaking on behalf of our entire community. Let me express my gratitude for your leadership. Our city would not be what it is today without you. Thank you. And I want to thank our listeners for taking a few minutes of your time with us today. That's it for now. Please look for discussions with Orlando history makers on this podcast channel. I'm your host, Orlando City Commissioner Robert Stuart, and I appreciate you listening. Remember, let's value our past, learn from it, and make our future brighter than ever. Thank you.
Thank you.